Good evening. Let's begin with what officials describe plainly, carefully, almost clinically. The United States, according to sources familiar with the discussions, is preparing to cut roughly 200 positions inside NATO command structures. Not troops on the ground, not tanks, not aircraft, positions. Jobs embedded inside the alliance's command centers. European officials were informed of this plan as part of a broader strategic adjustment under the Trump administration. And the way this information was delivered matters, because it was not framed as a crisis. It was not announced publicly. It was not accompanied by an immediate physical withdrawal of personnel. It was conveyed quietly, through diplomatic channels, as a change in posture, a recalibration. The positions affected are spread across key NATO locations: the United Kingdom, Belgium, Portugal. These are not peripheral outposts. These are core nodes in the alliance's operational and planning architecture. And yet, according to the sources, no one is packing up desks tomorrow. No flights have been booked. No offices shuttered overnight. The reduction is structural, not instantaneous. And that distinction is central to how allies are interpreting this moment. Because NATO, as an institution, is built as much on symbolism as on logistics. Who sits at which table? How many chairs are filled? Which flags are present? And when you remove 200 positions, even on paper, the message travels faster than the paperwork. One European official described it not as a rupture, but as a signal. A signal that the United States is adjusting how it engages inside the alliance, not leaving it, not dismantling it, but changing the shape of its presence. Now, the Trump administration has been clear repeatedly about its views on NATO. That clarity has not always come with reassurance. There has been ongoing friction between Washington and its allies over burden sharing, over roles, over responsibilities, and most recently over diplomatic tensions tied to President Trump's stated ambitions regarding Greenland. That issue, mentioned explicitly by European officials, has added strain to already sensitive conversations. So when this reduction of positions was communicated, it did not arrive in a vacuum. It arrived into an environment already humming with concern. One official described the move as symbolic, not operationally crippling, not immediately destabilizing, symbolic. And in alliances, symbolism is substance. The sources emphasize that this is part of a broader strategic shift, not a standalone action, a rethinking of how the United States allocates personnel within multinational structures, where influence is exercised, where presence is concentrated, and where it is quietly reduced. I mean, you feel it before you see it, one diplomat said privately. It's the absence that speaks. That absence, at least for now, is measured in positions rather than people. The command centers themselves will continue operating. The flags will remain. But the internal balance, the distribution of roles, the day-to-day rhythms of coordination will change. And European allies are watching closely, not because 200 positions will suddenly alter NATO's military capability, but because of what it suggests about priorities, about emphasis, about the direction of travel. The administration has characterized this as part of a strategic realignment, a term that sounds orderly, deliberate. But to allies, it raises questions that are not easily answered by spreadsheets. What does presence mean now? What does leadership look like in practice? And how much of the alliance's cohesion depends on these very human, very specific roles inside its command structure? There is no immediate personnel withdrawal. That point is stressed, again and again. No sudden gaps, no abrupt exits. But the knowledge that positions will be cut lingers, and it changes conversations. One official summed it up with a quiet kind of gravity. "This isn't loud," they said, "but it's not nothing." And that's where we are tonight, at the beginning of a process that is, for now, more about signals than movement, more about intent than action. A shift communicated in private, interpreted in public, and felt across an alliance built on shared presence. We'll continue. So let's pick up right there. Because once European officials were informed of the plan, the reaction was not explosive. It was cautious, measured, and deeply attentive to nuance. This was not delivered as an ultimatum. It was not framed as a rebuke. According to sources, it was presented as part of a broader strategic shift under the Trump administration. Language chosen carefully, words weighed. The emphasis was on structure, not rupture, on internal realignment, not alliance abandonment. And yet, the officials who received this briefing understood immediately what kind of message this was. They understood because of where these positions sit inside NATO's ecosystem. Command centers are not just buildings, they are nerve centers. They are where decisions are coordinated, where planning occurs, where allied officers work side by side in ways that are often invisible to the public but essential to cohesion. And within those spaces, positions matter. Titles matter. Seats matter. Who is present in which role determines how influence flows. The cuts, sources say, will affect key NATO entities located in the United Kingdom, Belgium, and Portugal. Again, no immediate withdrawal of personnel. That phrase keeps coming up, almost like a reassurance repeated aloud so it can be believed. But even without immediate movement, the knowledge of reduction alters expectations. If a position is scheduled to disappear, its authority begins to fade before the chair is ever empty. You know, it's like when someone announces they're leaving a job months in advance. They're still there, but everyone feels the countdown. European allies see this move as symbolic. That word is doing a lot of work here. Symbolic does not mean insignificant. Symbolic does not mean harmless. It means the action is meant to be read, to be interpreted. And what allies are reading into this reduction is shaped by the broader diplomatic environment, an environment already marked by friction. The Trump administration has engaged NATO allies in blunt discussions about alliance roles, about who contributes what, about who bears which burdens. Those conversations have been ongoing. And layered on top of that, more recently, have been diplomatic tensions related to President Trump's stated ambitions concerning Greenland. That issue, according to European officials, has added strain. Not because it directly affects NATO command staffing, but because it colors trust. And trust is the quiet currency of alliances. So when US officials conveyed plans to cut roughly 200 NATO positions, allies did not hear it in isolation. They heard it through the echo of those other disputes. They heard it as part of a pattern of reassessing commitments, of questioning established norms, of redefining what engagement looks like. Still, sources emphasize, there is no immediate operational impact. NATO's ability to function remains intact. Exercises continue. Planning continues. Coordination continues. But the internal calculus shifts because allies are left to ask what comes next. Not aloud, not publicly, but privately in the spaces where these things are actually processed. One European official described the moment as oddly quiet. No press conference, no dramatic announcement, just information passed across a table, and then absorbed. It was delivered calmly, the official said, and it landed heavily. That heaviness comes from uncertainty, from the fact that symbolic moves often precede substantive ones, not always, but often enough to command attention. The administration's broader strategic shift has been described as a reassessment of how the United States positions itself within multinational frameworks. That includes where personnel are stationed, which roles are prioritized, and how much presence is deemed necessary to achieve influence. From Washington's perspective, this is framed as efficiency, as alignment with strategic goals. From the perspective of allies, it feels like distance. Even if that distance is measured in organizational charts rather than miles. And because the reductions affect multiple countries, they ripple outward. Officials in London, Brussels, and Lisbon all receive the same message. This is not targeted at one partner, it is systemic. That universality is part of what makes it symbolic. It suggests a shift in how the United States views its role across the alliance as a whole. Not singling out, but stepping back. Just slightly. Just enough to be noticed. And in NATO, even slight movements are studied carefully. One official put it this way: when the biggest presence changes its shape, they said, everyone adjusts. There is also the matter of timing. This information is being shared during a period of diplomatic sensitivity, when unity is publicly emphasized but privately tested, when allies are keenly aware of how messages are sent and received. So the fact that this reduction comes without immediate withdrawal is both reassuring and unsettling. Reassuring because nothing collapses overnight. Unsettling because it signals intent without finality. A door partially closed, a light dimmed, not turned off. And that ambiguity leaves room for interpretation, which is why allies are treating this as a signal rather than a setback. They are watching for follow-through, for whether this structural reduction remains limited, or whether it marks the beginning of a broader repositioning. But publicly, restraint prevails. There is no dramatic response, no formal protest, no escalation. Because everyone understands that alliances endure not by reacting loudly to every shift, but by managing them carefully. Still, the emotional weight is there, quietly acknowledged. One diplomat, reflecting on the moment, offered a line that stuck. Sometimes, they said, what changes first is the silence. And in that silence, allies are listening. Listening for reassurance. Listening for clarity, listening for whether this symbolic cut remains symbolic, or whether it becomes something more tangible over time. For now, the facts remain unchanged. Roughly 200 positions are slated for reduction. They are spread across key NATO command centers. There is no immediate personnel withdrawal. And allies view the move as symbolic, set against a backdrop of diplomatic friction and strategic reassessment. Those are the knowns. Everything else lives in the pause. And pauses in international politics can be as telling as declarations. We're going to keep going. So now we come to the end of what is known, not what might happen, not what could follow, just what has been said, conveyed, and understood. The United States plans to cut roughly 200 positions within NATO command structures. That is the fact. It is part of a broader strategic shift under the Trump administration. That is also the fact. European officials were informed, not through headlines, not through public declarations, through diplomatic channels. And the locations affected are specific. The United Kingdom, Belgium, Portugal, key NATO entities, places where the alliance does its daily work, where coordination happens quietly, constantly, often unseen. There will be no immediate withdrawal of personnel. That point remains unchanged. No sudden absences, no empty offices tomorrow morning. And allies interpret this move not as an operational blow, but as a symbolic one. Symbolic, set against an atmosphere already shaped by diplomatic friction, including tensions related to President Trump's Greenland ambitions, including broader disagreements over alliance roles. Those are the boundaries of the known. Everything else stays outside them. And that matters because the power of this moment lies precisely in what it does not do. It does not dissolve NATO structures. It does not sever relationships. It does not halt cooperation. Instead, it adjusts the internal architecture, quietly. And sometimes those quiet adjustments linger longer than loud confrontations. For European allies, the message is not one of abandonment, but it is one of recalibration. A reminder that presence can change shape, that commitment can be expressed differently, that influence is not only about declarations, but about how many people are assigned to which roles, in which rooms. The reduction of positions does not immediately alter NATO's capabilities. That is important. Exercises continue, planning continues, the alliance remains functional. But the internal balance, the subtle equilibrium of representation, shifts, and alliances by their nature are sensitive to balance. The Trump administration's approach has emphasized reassessment, a reconsideration of how the United States engages multilaterally, where it invests personnel, how it defines leadership. This move fits within that framework, not as a dramatic break, but as a measured step. Measured steps, though, are often the ones most closely examined, because they suggest deliberation, they suggest intent, and allies are attuned to intent. One European official described the feeling this way: "It changes the temperature," they said, "not the weather." That distinction is telling. The climate remains, the alliance stands, but the air feels different. And when the air changes, people notice, especially in institutions built on long-standing habits and shared expectations. The absence of immediate personnel withdrawal creates a kind of suspended moment, a period where the decision exists, but its physical manifestation does not. That suspension invites attention. It invites interpretation. It invites careful watching. Because in diplomacy, what is delayed is not necessarily diminished. Sometimes it is simply staged. Still, there is restraint on all sides. No public escalation, no formal confrontation. Allies understand that symbolic moves can be absorbed, that alliances endure by managing change, not denying it. And so, the response has been measured, acknowledging the signal, registering the shift, and continuing to operate within the framework that remains. The Greenland issue lingers in the background of this moment, not as a direct cause of the position cuts, but as part of the broader diplomatic context in which they are received. It colors perceptions, it sharpens sensitivities, and it reminds allies that even long-standing relationships can experience strain. That strain does not automatically lead to rupture, but it does require attention. For now, the facts remain fixed. Roughly 200 NATO positions are slated for reduction. They are spread across key command centers. There is no immediate withdrawal of personnel, and allies see the move as symbolic, unfolding amid existing diplomatic friction. That is the complete picture, no more, no less. And perhaps the most telling aspect of this moment is how quietly it arrived. No dramatic unveiling, no closing of doors, just information shared, understood, and carried forward. In international affairs, those moments often matter precisely because they are understated, because they rely on listening rather than reacting, because they test not strength but confidence. One diplomat, reflecting on the situation, offered a line that captures the mood without adding anything to it. "Nothing broke," they said, "but something shifted." And that is where we leave it, with a shift acknowledged, with structures still standing, with alliances intact but attentive. The process continues beyond this point, as these things always do.